Okay. Bollocks. Channel stereo. D5. Yeah. Is it working now? Okay. Oh yeah, it's working now. Okay. Cool. Well, currently no one watching, but that's alright. Hi people in the future. Hi Jamie J. Cool. I'm hearable. Good. So I'm just gonna. I wanted to talk a little bit about now that I'm back in the country, now that I have actual internet. I wanted to talk about some music-y stuff. So like, I wanted to talk about in this particular How to Jazz. Welcome to How to Jazz. Talking about the importance of the blues. The blues are very important. Like if you're learning how to play jazz music. If you're learning how to play music in general, really, learning the blues is a very important part of that, because basically without the blues, you don't have music. You don't have Western music, at least. You don't have rock music. You don't have hard rock. You don't have metal. You don't have jazz. You don't have any of the stuff that comes out of the 20th century. Any of the big things like Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones, all those like big British, the British wave, all those things, you don't have those without the blues. And jazz as well is not, jazz has its roots heavily ingrained in the blues. So I wanted to talk a little bit about where the blues starts, like a traditional blues. I mean, there's different ways that the blues can be interpreted and all that sort of stuff. But I want to talk about the traditional like 12-bar blues, and then how that kind of evolved into like jazz blues and various other forms of jazz music using jazz blues forms using substitution and things like that kind of came from the bebop blokes like Charlie Parker and Bud Powell and Dizzy Gillespie and things like that. How they took that blues form and turned it into something completely different. Now for something completely different, and various things like that. So I thought I'd start. I actually have I have a Sibelius thing here, so we can have a look at. I haven't actually written out what it is yet, but I was gonna start by showing you what we would consider, I suppose, a standard blues form. I'm just going to fill these out with some quick little slashes. For those of you who don't use Sibelius, I apologize, but this is the thing that I've used since I was in high school. So this is what I'm going to be using now, just to kind of give you a visual of what it looks like on a music score. So I've got my 12 bars here, and I've filled them up with slashes. And so I'll do it in like a guitarist key, I suppose. So we'll talk about it in the key of E. So if we have E7 would be, we're in the key of E, and E7 is going to be our first chord. Let me get rid of these bloody chord symbols; they're awful. So the first chord in a key in a blues in E is going to be E7, and it's generally going to go between the 1, the 4, and the 5 of the key of E7, which are A. So E7, A7, and E7. So the first 4 bars are kind of like that. E7. Oh geez, I just unplugged my keyboard. That's not ideal. E7, A7, and then E7 again. So that's our first 4 bars. Now we're on to the bar 5, which then, so we go to the 4 again, which is the A7. Back to E7 here, yeah. So 2 bars of A7, and then 2 bars of E7, and then we get on to where we play the 5, the 4, and then back to the 1 again, and then probably back to the 5. So we've got B7 here, A7, and then E7, and then back to B7. I hope that all has come through quite nicely. Yes, good. Okay, so that would be our basic blues form. So if I'll play through it so you can hear what it sounds like. So E7, A7, E7, A7, E7, B7, A7, E7, and then B7. So that's our normal blues form, right? And that's pretty. That's what you're going to be playing if you're playing a standard traditional 12-bar blues. Now, if we talk about how we're going to change that and move that into more of a jazz style, first of all, a blues in the key of E in a jazz setting is going to be generally when you're playing jazz music, or starting out playing jazz music. I'm not saying you'd never play a blues in E in jazz, but like when I first started playing jazz music and when I was learning jazz music and things like that, the keys that you would most commonly play in would be the kind of the flattened keys, B flat, E flat, F blues, and that's kind of just because this music was played a lot on those kinds of instruments, on saxophones, on trumpets and things like that, and those were the keys that sat really well on those instruments. So so probably the first jazz blues I learned was probably in B flat, if I'm going to be honest. So one of the main differences, I suppose, between a traditional blues and a jazz blues is the use of these 2-5-1 cadences, right? The insertion of those into the form. The basic bare bones of the form are kind of gonna stay the same. You're gonna start out by the first 4 bars kind of being in the 1 territory, so you're gonna be kind of in an E7 tonality, and then the next 4 bars are kind of going to be generally in an A7 tonality in the 4, and then the last 4 bars are kind of like a turnaround, going from modulating. Sorry, not modulating. Words escaping me. Just leading you back to the 1 chord. So I mean, in the last 4 bars of this, the lead back is going 5, 4, 1, which kind of works. It has a bit of movement in it, but the big difference that would change in like, you could play all of this the same, and the last 4 bars, instead of being 5, 4, 1, would be 2, 5, 1. So in the key of E7, that'd be C sharp. Oh, sorry, I'm thinking of B7. F minor 7, F sharp minor 7. Sorry, B7, E7. So you can hear that resolution. Sorry. That kind of resolution there. And the thing about, that's the word I was looking for, resolution. Haha, I did it. I'm a musician now. I have a degree. One of the kind of tricky things about playing the blues is that all the chords have this kind of dominant 7 tonality to them. So resolution is kind of is a little loose. A little bit of the word doesn't work super well. You obviously do resolve, but there's always this kind of tension throughout the whole thing, because everything's in this kind of dominant 7 Mixolydian kind of tonality, which is inherently a tensional, intense, like camping. You can't run through a campsite. You can only ran because it's past tense. Anyway, so let's talk about how we can change this this E7, this E blues into the traditional kind of thing, into more of a jazz thing. So I talked about changing. So I'll just copy and paste this so we can see it down here and see the changes that I would kind of make. So I talked about changing these last 4 bars from 5, 4, 1 into a 2, 5, 1. So we can do that first. We can go F sharp 7, oh sorry, F sharp minor 7, minus 7, not minus 6, and then B7 back to E7. So that would be the first change that you kind of make to make this more of a jazz sounding blues, right? So putting that 2-5-1. One of the things about jazz music, which I've said quite a lot, is it's abound with 2-5-1s. 2-5-1s are the go-to kind of progression that help move the tonality forward, move the harmony forward. You have rather than just going from one chord to another, placing a 5 chord before the chord that you're wanting to go to, or placing a 2-5 before the chord you go to, regardless of what sort of key you're in or whatever, is going to quote unquote make it inherently more jazzy. So with that being said, you see here we go to an A7 chord, right? So we're going through, and there's this big old bar of nothing right here. We're just stagnant on this E7 chord. So something we could do. E itself is acting as a 5 chord to that A7. It itself is acting as a 5, resolving to the A7. But what we could do in this bar here is put in a 2-5 to lead to the A7. So the 2 of A is B minor, E7, A7. So we've got, instead of just going E7 for a whole bunch, going B minor, E7, A7. So now we have this kind of sound. So you can hear that already sounding a lot more jazzy. Obviously, I'm putting in a walking bass line, which makes things sound more jazzy anyway. But having that little 2-5 there leads your ear on to that A7. Now another common thing in jazz blues is and in fact in a lot of traditional blues as well, but in this bar here, which you can see is kind of empty, putting a diminished chord in. So this would be like an A sharp or a B flat diminished sound here. So you'd sound like this, right? Going from the B7, B minor to the B minor to E7 to A7. That's the, okay, so that would be that. You can hear that that kind of diminished sound at that, and it sounds quite nice. Like I say, it definitely has made its way, or was something that was important in jazz, in traditional kind of blues music. Sorry, I haven't been paying attention to the chat that much. Hi everyone. Sorry if you've just been joining me. I'm just kind of rambling a little bit about blues music. Play a song for Tim Blake. I will play a song for Tim Blake a little bit later. But for now, play the melodic pentatonic and the relative minor chord. Yeah, okay, cool. So I mean I can talk. At the moment I'm just talking about how we're changing the blues form into a jazz blues form, a traditional into a jazz blues form. But then I'll take a little look later at what to play over this kind of stuff, because obviously it gets a bit more complicated with more chords and all that sort of nonsense. So yeah, putting this diminished chord in here is just a common blues thing, and it sounds really nice in the jazz setting as well. And that B flat diminished kind of, what is it? What do we got there? Let me have a look at. So I did have my. Is this gonna work? No, my keyboard stopped working. Bollocks. Okay, I'm just gonna type it out. So let's have a look at why B7. Well, let's look at the. I was gonna. I've been saying that these things resolve, but let me type in some stuff so you can actually see why they resolve. So the notes in a B minor 7 are B. Oh, jeez, I need to change the note type. Let's go back to just normal. Okay, the notes in a B minor 7: B, D, F sharp, and A. That would be a B minor 7 chord. And then that changes to an E7, which would in fact be E, E, G sharp, oh geez, G sharp, not G natural, B, and D. and then that resolves to an A7 chord, which is the notes A, obviously, A, C sharp, oh jeez, oh god, C sharp, no, C, oh, Jesus, how do I Sibelius? I don't know how. C sharp, no, you bastard, C sharp, E, and G. So that's our you can hear that resolution even in itself in that crappy Sibelius kind of sound. But the notes that are really important in these resolutions are the thirds and the sevenths. The thirds and the sevenths, if you're playing jazz music and you don't know what to do, play thirds and sevenths in the sense of you can hear the resolution from that, even me just playing those two simple notes. So we can, in jazz, you can basically just ignore the root, because the root's going to be played by the bass player anyway. The bass player and the pianist and things like that, they generally cover the root of the chord. It's very much implied, so you don't need to worry too much about playing that in your voicings or in your lines. The fifth again is kind of superfluous at this point. We don't need to worry about that. And same thing here. Okay, so if we take a look at these two notes here, I'll just move the D down an octave like that. Love moving the D. And so if we move the D down an octave, we can see the relationship between. Oh, I'll do the same with this A. So I get rid of the root, get rid of the fifth, move that G down an octave, and take a look at this. So these are the all I'm left with here are the thirds and the sevenths of these chords, which are the notes that define what the chord are. The third tells you whether it's minor or whether it's major. So in B minor 7 chord, we've got a minor third, so it's a minor chord. And then the seventh tells us what sort of seventh chord it is. In a B minor 7, it's going to have a minor 7. And if it was a major 7, so in the key of B, the major 7 is a sharp, it would be a B minor major 7, which would sound like this. Or like this. I don't want to play it on the guitar. It's got that kind of sound to it, but that's not what we're playing right now. So, and in this E7 here, we have a major third, so it's a major triad with a flattened seventh on top, which makes it a dominant seventh chord. And then the same over here, we have the G and the C sharp. C sharp being the third of A, so it's a major triad with a minor seventh on top, which makes it a dominant seventh chord. So those are the two notes that really define the sound of the chord. Anything else is kind of just color tones. The fifth can be added in there to add in different colors and sounds like that. The ninth, the 11th, the 13th and stuff. So I mean, you can play things like an E7 13, that kind of thing. E7 flat 13. You know, to create different colors and tension, you know, flat 9, sharp 9, all that sort of stuff. You can add those notes in to create color, but the real bass, the real essence of the chord is created from the thirds and the sevenths. And I say that a lot when I'm talking about jazz music, because that's a really valuable, important thing to get your head around. If you're playing through lines, if you're playing, you know, comping and things like that, you're always going to be in the right place if you really outline the thirds and sevenths of the chord. Anyway, so you can see if we look at these notes, you can see the resolution happening. I'll put these right beside each other. You can see this A resolves down a semitone to G sharp. The D stays the same place. The D stays the same, but the A resolves down a half step to a G sharp, and then again, if I move this down, we can see it in the same octave. So. And then from the E7 to the A7, the D resolves down a half step to a C sharp, and the G sharp resolves down a half step to a G. So you've got this kind of semitonal resolution thing happening. And then, you know, like I said before, this A7 still has a bit of tension in it because of that tritone sound that is inherent within a dominant seventh chord. So it's still going to have a little bit of tension, but there's definitely a resolution there which you can hear. And so that's kind of what's going on there. Let me put these back where they were. How did I get onto that? Crap knows. Okay, so I mean, I was talking about why that resolution kind of works rather than just telling you. See, I was giving you a net or a rod rather than just throwing a fish at you or something, however that works. Anyway, okay, so that's that resolution. The B, oh, that's right, I was going to look at the B flat diminished and why it resolves to this E7, and it kind of does. Let's have a look. So the notes in a B flat diminished. Let's go ahead and have a look at what those are. Notes in a B flat diminished would be, the first note would be B flat. The next note would be D flat. The next note would be F flat, I suppose. Yeah, so or E natural, but it's easier to write it as an F flat. It's kind of gross, but you get the idea. And then an A double flat, which is a G. So that's our B flat diminished chord. Interesting thing about diminished chords, I'm making a video. I say I'm making a video. I've been making videos for a long time now, but haven't actually brought any out. But I'm going to be making a video about diminished chords and the nature, how they kind of work, because they are what you call a symmetrical chord, and the scale is also what you call symmetrical. And they've got really interesting properties, and one of the interesting properties is the fact that they're built on these minor thirds. So all of the notes are equidistant from each other. The distance from a B flat to a D flat is a minor third, and the distance from a D flat to a F flat is a minor third, and the distance from, hold on, is that right? Yeah, the distance from a D flat to an F flat is a minor third, and the distance from an F flat, which is an E, and to a double flat, which is a G, is also a minor third. So it's got everything is equidistant from each other, which is a really interesting property, and it has some interesting kind of characteristics that go along with that. Anyway, so this B diminished, it resolves to E7 kind of interestingly, because if we have a look at the notes, I'll put our E7 here now. Let me see. I'm going to have an E. So again, E7 is E, G sharp, B, and D, right? So if I flip a couple of these around, change up the octaves. If I put the G sharp up an octave, see, it's got that relationship there. The B stays where it is, the D stays where it is. Okay, so this is what we call a drop 2 voicing. I won't tell you why that is, because again, I'll ramble for a whole bunch. But anyway, if we have a look at this, you can now see or actually no, I need to change. I'll put that there. Is that what I was going to do? No, I wasn't going to do that. I was going to move that. So that F flat, which is an E, I just put down an octave. And the rest kind of stays the same. So now we can kind of see the resolution that's happening here. The E is staying the same. The B flat is resolving up a semitone to a B. The D flat is resolving up a semitone to a D, and the G is resolving up a semitone to a G sharp. So you've got this kind of resolution, which is an interesting resolution. Generally, when we were talking about semitonal resolution, they kind of resolve in a downwards way, but this is kind of coming from the bottom and resolving upwards. But it kind of works. It's quite nice. That's kind of what's going on there. Now, so we're getting more and more kind of close to what I would consider a jazz blues at this point. The next change I would kind of make is and you probably heard me playing it before, is placing a 5 chord before this F sharp minor 7 here. A 5 chord probably with a flattened 5 or a sharp 9. You can hear that kind of sound. So in this case, it's a C sharp dominant 7. So C sharp 7. So that is going to be what we'd put there. Now, if I was going to be really smart and funky and cool, smart jazz guy, I would also put a 2 before that, so we'd have a G sharp. Oh, geez. G sharp 7. G sharp minor 7, sorry. So now we've got like a 2-5, G sharp minor 7, C7, C sharp 7 to F sharp minor 7. So we have this kind of 2-5, just like I did with this B minor E7 to A7. If you put a G sharp minor 7, C sharp 7 to F sharp minor 7, you're well on your way to being a fancy jazz man. Sorry, again, I'm sorry, I'm not paying too much attention to the chat at the moment. So if you've been asking things, I apologize for ignoring you. But anyway, so this is so that would be what I do kind of before that, and then we've got our 2-5 back into the 1 here. Now the other thing that we might want to do to create a sense of jazziness and a sense of like what we call a turnaround. So generally when we get to these last 4/2 bars of the form like this, it's called we play what we call a turnaround. Now there's a turnaround is basically a resolution which quote unquote turns us back around into the beginning of the tune again, right? Now there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. I mean, this is already a turnaround going from E7, B7 to back to E7 here. So, but what we can do is we can add in a couple of different chords. Now, just like I did here with this G sharp minor 7 to C sharp 7 to F sharp minor 7, you know, that placing that 2/5 before the F sharp minor, we can have a look. The B7 is definitely resolving to that E flat, to the E7. That's what that B7 kind of does. It creates that tension which leads us back to that E7. But what we can do is we can go ahead and make that a 2/5 rather than just a 5. So we can put an F sharp minor 7 right there. So these last 2 bars are we can put that that kind of 2/5 in there. So instead of it just being that, now it's E7, F sharp minor 7, B7, E7. So that's kind of what we do there. Now again we can kind of just work backwards and we can put our C sharp 7 in here as well. And so now we get this kind of cool little turnaround where we have like a E7, E7, C sharp 7, F minor 7, B7 back to E. So we get this kind of sound. Nice little kind of turnaround. You can hear that resolving back to that E7. It's kind of a cool sound. So you see what I mean. Now this would be generally what I would consider a jazz blues. This is kind of what guys like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and all that sort of stuff would kind of play. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this to B flat because it makes it a little easier to kind of do. There's a, where are we? Transpose. Where are you? Transpose this section interval up a diminished fifth. That's what I want. Diminished fifth. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Now I'm going to get rid of these voicings here because they're kind of in my way. Copy. Paste. 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 And the same thing here. Okay, cool. So there's our jazz blues in the key of. So I want that to be an E diminished, an F flat diminished. So there's our this would be our jazz blues in the key of B flat. So if you're ever going to this, it'd be the first thing you'd want to learn if you're going to go to a jazz blues, a jazz jam kind of thing, right? And there are a lot of jazz heads that you'd play over this form. Ten of Madness, Now's the Time. What else is in B flat? No, that's an F. But you know, learning this in F and E flat are going to be valuable for you, and then more, you know, A flat and D and G, you know, various other forms. Learning this. Now, in fact, I talked about this with some of my students, but learning the form, but learning it in a functional sense instead of, you know, with numbers, with letters, because the thing is, like, if you talk about learning something in all 12 keys, right? I mean, that makes the task a lot more daunting. We're talking about, you know, if you learn it in 12 keys, that means you've got to learn, you know, this. I mean, how many chords have we got here? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, so we've got 16 times 12, which is, I can't do maths, but that's in the 100 and something. So that's learning 100 and something different chords and the way they all kind of go together. That is kind of a daunting task. But if you kind of break it down into its fundamental parts, I might have talked about this before as well, but if you can do that and learn how it works functionally, it's going to be a lot easier for you to then play it, you know, in different keys. And what I mean by that is, if we think about this form, rather than B flat, E flat, B flat, F minor 7, B flat, we think about it as 1, 4, 1, 2, 5 into the 4, sharp 4 diminished, 1, 2, 5 into the 2, 5, 1, 6, 2, 5. So if you think about the blues form as that, the jazz blues form as that kind of functional way instead of this very specific way. You can then take that and go, okay, well, if I'm playing 1-4-1, 2-5 into the 2-5 into the 4 in the key of D flat, that means that the 1 is D flat, then you're playing the 4, which is G flat 7, and then you're playing the 1, which is D flat 7, and then you're playing a 2-5 into the 4, which is A flat minor, D7, D flat 7, G flat 7, G flat 7. So it makes it a whole bunch easier rather than just remembering that specific. Because if I remember B flat, E flat, B flat, F minor, B flat, it's going to be a lot more difficult to transpose that into D flat. You're going to have to think, okay, well, I have to go up a minor third. So B flat up a minor third, that's D flat, and then E flat up a minor third, that's G flat, and then B flat up a minor third as well as D flat. You get what I mean. So you're kind of tripling your workload if you're thinking about it like that. So anytime you're learning any tunes, especially like the blues, the rhythm changes, giant steps, things like that, forms that are commonly used throughout jazz music, learning them in a functional sense rather than just this kind of way is kind of cool. Okay, so that's the blues form, a jazz blues form. Now let me show you some ways that we can kind of make this change it up a little bit more even. I'll show you first how we'd turn this into what we'd call like a Parker blues, which is very similar to the jazz blues, but he's put in quite a few little different substitutions that make it a little bit more interesting. And this is what or like a bird blues. This would be what you'd the tune Blues for Alice is like this. Confirmation is kind of a bird blues, but with a bridge. But let's look at how we can change this into a bird blues. So in the key of B flat, what he kind of does, it's good to kind of work backwards. You can work backwards from a place that you're aiming to get to, and then and place 2 5s in front of it, because that's kind of what he does in a bird blues. So I'm going to change this into the key of F, because that'll make it more familiar to Blues for Alice, which is like I say the quintessential bird blues tune, I suppose. So we're going to transpose this up a perfect fourth. Wait, upper fourth? Upper fifth, sorry. Upper fifth. There we go. Okay, so we're in the key of F now. So everything's in F. And like I say, we can kind of work backwards. So this kind of works for like giant steps and countdown as well. The way that I'd apply the Coltrane matrix to various things, I find it easier to kind of work backwards from the place that you're aiming to go, because that's kind of, I'll talk about the matrix another time. But like for this, okay, so we're aiming for this B flat 7 chord, right? That's our target. So if we work backwards, we've already got a 2 5 into B flat here. So what we can do before this 2 5 into B flat is we can put another 2 5 before the 2 5 into B flat, which is leading into the C minor 7. So that we'd put like D minor 7, G7. So that's another 2 5 before C minor 7, and then again before that we can put another 2 5. In this case, Parker uses a minor 2 5, so E minor 7 flat 5, and then A7. So you can see we've got this kind of progression of 2 5s that lead us to B flat 7. So rather than it just being a straight like this, rather than it being like that, we've got this kind of thing going on, right? You can hear this kind of long lead up, long resolution into the B flat, which finally resolves. Now the cool thing about that is, I mean, yeah, you can use it in the context of this tune, obviously, but you could also use it if you're playing across just a normal blues tune. Someone's playing these will. Someone's playing that, right? And you come along and play these changes. So rather than, so you could do something like, you know, you could play lines that kind of imply these changes over top of a blues tune, which would, you know, it just creates a little bit more interest in your lines rather than just playing F7, B flat 7, F7, 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 B flat. You know, creates a little bit more interest there. And so then kind of what happens after that, what does he do? He goes dun, 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 dun. So he places a whole bunch of 2/5s descending chromatically through to this G minor thing. So again, that's kind of a kind of a thing that you'll do in jazz music, is play descending chromatic chords to lead towards towards your target. So in this case, we've got B7, and then what? Instead of going to the B diminished here, we go to a B minor 7. Sorry, B flat minor 7, E flat 7, which in fact is quite a common thing to do because this is quite a common thing to do, and it's interesting because it resolves in some interesting ways. But like going to the 4 as you normally would, but then going to the minor 4, and now I've talked about this before as well, which is like the minor plagal cadence, right? It's playing the 4 and then playing it as a minor, which then resolves back to the 1. Yeah, I like that a lot. So normally that would then resolve back to the 1 here. So I mean, you wouldn't have you might not normally have the E flat 7 just have it as a B flat minor, but then adding in the 5 as well creates this quote unquote backdoor progression, which then leads back to the 1. But instead of going to the 1 here, they go to the 3, which is A minor 7 and D7, which just happens to be a semitone down from the B flat minor. So we've gone down to A minor and D7. So A minor is, you know, it's the third of the key of F, and it kind of works as you know, it could be an F major 7. I mean, they kind of quote unquote are the same chord, sort of, kind of, but I mean it works either way. You've got this chromatic. And then last of all, he goes down one more chromatic, chromatic 2/5. Sorry, another 2/5 down a semitone again to A flat minor 7, D flat 7, and then we have the normal turnaround, 2 5 1 6 2 5 1. So that would be what we consider a Parker blues. Now I'll play it for you so you can have a listen. So that would be that's what the Parker blues or the Bird blues kind of sounds like. And again, that's an important progression to kind of have under your belt, and having those substitutions, these ones here in particular, you know, kind of knowing those and being able to bring those out in your lines when you're playing over a blues form can make a, you know, if you're feeling a little stale in what you're doing, you know, playing just, you know, B flat 7, B diminished 1 6, you know, across this bit, rather than just playing those, adding in this kind of thing. So so maybe in that B flat 7. That might be what you'd normally play, right? But instead, maybe something like this. Something like that instead, and I mean that, yeah, it's going to sound interesting when the bass player and the pianist are playing one thing and you're playing this other thing. It will create a little bit of interest. So that's kind of how you get to the Bird blues there. Now I just wanted to quickly touch on a couple of other things that you can use to change up this form. One of the things here in this last little turnaround here, rather than it being a 1 6 2 5 1, which is fine, You could play here. This can be the 3. You know, I kind of mentioned that A7, A minor 7, and F7 are kind of the same chord in the same sense that D minor 7 and B7 are kind of the same chord. And when I say that, they contain similar notes. So a D minor 7 is D, F, A, and C, and a B flat 7, sorry, is B. So B flat, D, F, and A flat. So it's got an A flat and a B flat in it, rather than an A and a C. But the D and the F kind of they kind of have similar notes, which so they have this relationship. So you can play, in this case, you could play a D minor 7 there, and instead of the G7, we can play what we call a tritone substitution, which I might have talked about before. But very briefly, a tritone substitution is when you take a dominant 7th chord and you play a dominant 7th chord from a tritone away. Now, the reason that works is because they both have the same thirds and sevenths. I talked about thirds and sevenths before and about how important they are at defining what the chord is. Well, a G7, the third is B flat. The third is B, and the 7th is F. And I can probably even draw it out for you. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at a G7 chord. So a G7 is G, B, D, and F. And a B flat chord, a D flat 7 chord, D flat, F, you already see a similarity there, A flat, and C flat. Okay, so those are if we have a look at those two chords together, you can see those up nice and close like that. This is a G7, and this is a D flat 7. Now, obviously they look a little different because of a few things, but like if we change this C flat into a B natural, which is what it is, you can see we have that same note, and then we can have a look at this F. If I pop the F up an octave, you can see it's got the F, they share an F, and they share a B flat, and then so the two notes that are kind of different are the G is now an A flat, and the D is now a D flat. So you've got two notes which are the same, and then two notes which are kind of different. So what happens is when you're playing a G7 chord, but instead you play a D flat 7, you get this interesting sound which creates a little bit of extra tension. The D flat acts as a flat 5 of the G7, and the A flat acts as a flat 9 of the G7, and so you get a G7 flat 9, flat 5, or flat 5, flat 9 sound when you play that D flat 7 in the place of G7. But like I say, the reason why it works is because they both have these notes which are the same. They have the thirds and the sevenths of those two chords are the same note, even though they have slightly different names when you're talking about them from their relative keys. So, and in this case, the B is the third of G7, and the F is the 7th of G7, while the B is the 7th of D flat 7, and the F is the third. So the function of the notes has or relationship to the root of those chords has flipped around. The third becomes the 7th, and the 7th becomes the third. But they essentially have that same base, that same core, the same core to them. So that's why it kind of works. And the other reason it kind of that is kind of cool is it creates this descending chromatic bass line. We have a D minor 7 moving to a D flat 7, which creates a chromatic bass line rather than a cyclical bass line going from D down to G. So going down a fifth to G, or up a fourth, down a fifth to G, you're going down a semitone to D flat, and then to C minor, and then we can do the same thing with the F. We can make the, instead of it being an F7, it can be a B7, and so now we have this descending chromatic bass line, rather than a cyclical bass line, rather than it being that, it's now, which sounds kind of cool. So that's kind of cool, and that happens quite a lot in jazz music as well. It happens in at the end of the song Ladybird, but with major chords rather than dominant 7th chords. So the tune goes, the last little turnaround goes C7, E flat, A flat, D flat, C major 7. So C major 7, E flat major 7, A flat major 7, D flat major 7, C major 7, and it sounds really cool. And again, if you play that over those, the thing is, again, if you play, if you keep these chords in mind when you're playing through the turnaround like that, you're playing your lines or whatever, it's gonna sound really cool. It's gonna sound really hip. It's gonna sound totes hip. So you can do that kind of tritone substitution in a lot of things as well. I mean, like this B flat 7, we can tritone substitute that to be an E7 instead. And so now we've got F minor 7, E7, E flat 7. So that you can do that all over the place. You can put those in, and they're gonna have you've got to obviously tastefully, but you can technically do that in a lot of places. You could do it here if you want. You could change this G7 into a D flat 7. There you go. Nice little chromatic line there as well. And again, and also across this this kind of big 2/5 here, you can create a longer what's the word? A longer turnaround, if you like. We talked about taking, aiming for a certain chord. So say we're aiming for this B flat 7 at the top of the chart here. If we aim for that, okay, so we've already got, I'm going to put this as F7 again, F7 and G7. So we've already got the beginning of our turnaround here, C7, F7, D minor 7, G7, C minor 7, F7. So we can go even further back and play our 2/5. So we could put a E minor 7 here, E minor 7, A7, and then even further back we could here F sharp minor 7 flat 5 maybe, B7. So instead of our turnaround being C minor, F, D, G, C, F. Now instead we've got F sharp minor 7, B7, E minor 7, A7, D7, G7, C minor 7, F7, B flat. So it creates a lot of tension, a lot of interest, and this would be something maybe you'd do later on in your solo. Like if I'm talking about soloing now, if you're playing this kind of stuff, obviously the thing about crafting a solo is you kind of, in general, starting simpler and kind of moving into more complex harmony and rhythm stuff kind of later on. So you kind of create this, kind of in the same way that with like the narrative of a book or whatever, or a movie, you ramp up the tension the further along you get, and then you release it all out, and that's the end of your solo. These are just ideas for how you can create interesting harmony and things like that in your jazzness. I'm going to bring my face back on because I've been looking at that for a while. Okay, there we go. So that's a bunch of ideas about how, or sort of a progression from traditional 12-bar blues into jazz blues, into bird blues, and then some interesting kind of substitution things to create interest in your tunes or whatever. And so the thing is, you can use this stuff in your lines when you're playing jazz music. You can use it when you're comping to create some interest when you're comping behind someone, or when you're composing. So like if you're composing a jazz blues or a tune or something like that, you can apply a lot of this stuff to that as well. So when you're going ahead and you're composing a song, you want to create some tension, some movement in your piece, rather than it just being this one statement chord. You can use these ideas to do that. I'm sorry I didn't play the guitar as much this time, but I was doing a lot of kind of talking about theory stuff, which I do enjoy a lot. I'm going to stop now, but thank you for those who tuned in. I had the idea that I'll just talk about a couple of things that I wanted to. That I'm kind of going to be doing. So first of all, I'm going to kind of look through this and maybe chop it up into some smaller, digestible parts, I suppose, because watching a 50-minute video on how to fucking tritone substitute is a little bit of a task for some. I understand that. So I'm going to be doing that. Am I still making noises? I'm assuming people can fucking hear me. I just need to check this again. Oh jeez. Yep, no, I'm still making it. Just not. There's no thing coming up on this stuff. Anyway, beside the point. What was I getting at? So yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm working on working on doing some videos on how to vocally harmonize. So that's going to be coming kind of soon. I've got an idea to look at various bands that use vocal harmonies and then take apart what they do and explain how to vocally harmonize using that. I was gonna talk about something, but I can't remember what the crap down hell it was. Yeah, I'm gonna chop these up into some smaller little bites so that you can get some relevant information from them in smaller little bits. There was totally something else I was gonna bring up. I mean, I'm gonna work on my Bohemian Rhapsody video now. I know I've been saying that for fucking 4 months now, but I am gonna get it done before I fucking take off again. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Like I said, I'm trying to remember. I swear there was something more important that I was going to say, but I can't remember what it was. Oh, that's right. I'm doing guitar lessons. I'm doing lessons online. So if you're watching this and you enjoyed, talking about music and stuff. I mean, this is obviously kind of advanced jazz stuff, but I do basic, more beginner stuff as well. I can teach guitar. I can teach ukulele. I can teach bass, all that sort of stuff. I can teach basic theory, like if you're doing music theory in high school or something like that. I could do all that sort of nonsense. So if you want to talk to me about getting lessons and things like that, send me a message my DMs on Twitter at music_man_Mike on Twitter. Leave a comment underneath. Or whatever, and get hold of me, and we can organize like an online lesson. That's the thing. I do them over Skype, or over Hangouts or whatever like that. So if you want to, if you're a beginner and you want to learn some new stuff, if you're intermediate and you want to work on some things, show me some stuff and I can help refine what you're doing. Or if you're advanced and you're doing gigs and stuff, but you still want to learn some stuff, or if you're learning music theory in high school and you need to pass a test or something like that, I can help out with that stuff as well. So let me know in the comments, and I can we can sort something out. Otherwise, I'll be doing some more of these in a bit. I'm going to go work on my Bohemian Rhapsody video now. I promise I am. It's going to be done. I'm promising myself mostly because it's a task. Oh my god. And yeah. Much love to you all. Talk to you soon. Bye.